Good morning to those of you just joining us. We'll start in just a moment. For those of us who just joined us, we'll give everybody a minute to get online, and then we'll get started. All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Vernon-Sanborn, Associate Principal at Mazzetti, and my distinct pleasure today is to introduce Ratan Milevoj. I got it right. She's going to talk about transforming hospital facilities, leveraging renewable energy microgrids, and the Inflation Reduction Act for resilience and sustainability. I think this topic is really going to be interesting to our audience today. So in summary, today's challenging environment characterized by economic pressures, healthcare providers must seek innovative solutions for cost effectiveness, resilience, and sustainability. This presentation will spotlight the pioneering energy initiative by Valley Children's Healthcare, a nonprofit pediatric hospital system in Central California, serving a largely underserved region, which leveraged the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 to create a self-sustaining renewable energy microgrid. By adopting a strategic approach to energy and embracing renewable energy microgrids, hospitals can achieve cost savings, enhance resilience, reduce their carbon footprints, and prioritize patient care. This talk aims to illustrate how renewable energy microgrids can revolutionize healthcare facilities, fostering both energy resilience and economic viability. By the end of this presentation, attendees will gain insights into the strategic implementation of renewable energy microgrids, utilizing financial incentives, and promoting a culture of sustainability and resilience in healthcare design and development. And our speaker today is Ratan Milevoj. She is Vice President of Innovation, Marketing, Communications, and Assistant Chief Strategy Officer for Valley Children's Healthcare. In this role, she's responsible for overseeing the organization's strategic marketing and communication efforts, as well as implementing and managing new ideas and innovations to bring best practices to the organization. Her robust background in operations and strategy is evident in her approach to projects that improve operational efficiency, implement technology solutions, and deliver results that drive revenue growth and cost savings for the organization. Ratan has brought this experience to developing Valley Children's digital strategy, enhancing the organization's digital front door. Under her strategic lead, Valley Children's continues to expand its digital health infrastructure to improve healthcare delivery and meet the personalized needs of today's increasingly digitally oriented healthcare consumers. She also led the development of Valley Children's energy strategy, a significant environmental stewardship initiative to improve the hospital's energy resilience and position Valley Children's as a national leader in healthcare decarbonization. I look forward to hearing from you this morning, Ratan. It's over to you.
Thank you, Christina, and good morning to everyone. You can hear me okay, Christina?
We can.
Excellent, excellent, and thank you for that introduction. So my goal today is really to hope to inspire all of you through our story and our work that we've done around energy strategy. And you probably picked it up from the description that Christina gave about my background. I'm not your typical person who would be looking at decarbonization or resilience. I'm not in our facilities department. I report to our CEO, and this work was done under guidance from our board and our CEO in my innovation and strategy role, which is where really the reason I mentioned that is to give you some thoughts on this work can start anywhere in your organization as long as you have the will to pursue it. So with that, what I wanted to do is maybe start talking to you a little bit about our hospital, and I'm going to take only a couple of minutes. And the reason to share this information is really around it doesn't matter where you are and who you are. This work is doable for anyone. And I really do believe if we at Valley Children's can do this work, anyone across the country, any other hospital can really do it. Because of some of the circumstances I'll share with you around our hospital and organization, aren't ones that you typically think of when you think of this kind of work. We are not a very wealthy hospital. We are serving some of the most underserved population. However, you see a picture of, these are our founding mothers. These are 5 women 70 years ago, had the vision of creating a children's hospital because we serve a large geographic area of underserved patients, and our patients were having to go to north part of California or south part of California, and these aren't families that could afford to do that. These women at that time were also told there's no way they could start a children's hospital. And here we are 70 years later. We are a 358 bed regional provider with 670 physicians, 3,500 staff, and we are training our pediatric workforce, again, an area where we are designated for healthcare professional shortages area and are continuing to train our own people. I'm not sure if you were familiar with, or several of you as I have met over the years, are not always sure of where is the Valley Children's Hospital. So if you think of Central California, it is a large stretch of land between San Francisco and LA. And what you see in blue are the regions we serve. So that's a 12 county area that we serve. It's primarily a rural area. We have 1.3 million kids that we provide services to. More importantly, which is the part I was saying, in spite of your circumstances, you can imagine this work is the patients we serve, 75% of the patients are on Medi-Cal, which is Medicaid of, for California, it's called Medi-Cal. So a largely underserved population, a largely, from the demographics perspective, other than Caucasian. But again, for the purpose of this conversation, there are a couple of things I wanted to call out and share with you, that in our region, in San Joaquin Valley, 1 out of 3 kids live in poverty, in deep poverty, and that's the region that we serve in. 40% of the kids are obese, and 25% lack access to regular dependable sources. What that means is they're largely in areas where there are food deserts. And it is so ironic because Central California is the breadbasket of the world. Some of the largest crops in agriculture is grown here, and yet these are the demographics within which we function. The part I didn't mention, and as I was looking at it, our air quality isn't the best. The air from north and south settles in the valley. We certainly have, because of all the ag, our air quality hasn't really been the best for us. So asthma is very prevalent for our patients as well. So again, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to set the backdrop that we are doing this work in spite of the circumstances that are available to us. Okay, so part of jumping into our conversation today, let me kind of start with why we started to think of energy more strategically. And there were many drivers, and I will say there are 4 that I called out that I hope to share a couple of stories with you about, just again, to help tie why microgrid was the strategy we needed to go to and how this conversation evolved. This conversation for us did not evolve from decarbonization. Decarbonization was a step 2 of a conversation. This conversation for us started with resilience. So our current facility, you see a picture of that there. That was the very first slide, our cover page. We moved at our current location in 1998. Our main hospital parcel is connected to a dedicated substation that we own. That substation is at 50% life. And it is our single point of vulnerability. It needs maintenance. It is aging. And up until this project was given to me, we were down a path realizing that's a vulnerability for us, that if it went down, we can't even get it repaired for 2 to 6 months. That's when it takes a new transformer to come. We were down a path where our board had approved a second transformer substation right next to it, just so we could have redundancy. We are no longer following this path because we have since again gone a different route, which I'll talk to you about in a little bit. We have, of course, generators as a backup, but the challenge with our generator backup power is that only our emergency hospital plugs are connected. So there are many other services that are provided in a hospital, and those services do not have access. And so it's again, if any of you are from a hospital environment, imagining that your hospital went down and you have a single point of failure, it will keep you up at night. And that sleep was lost for many of our senior leaders who were responsible for making sure that our infrastructure is working. So again, very much in an environment where resilience was needed. I think everyone's sort of familiar with rising energy prices and cost in healthcare is going up, and whether it's labor cost or other costs, supply costs, and certainly energy cost is one of them. So as part of this work, when I started I spent a fair amount of time with our director of facilities, and he was very informative and I would say formative in sort of the direction we went. And he was sharing with me that, right around when we started this work was about 3 years ago, we had just Ukraine war was going on, and he shared with me it's not that U.S. has less supply of power. It is, again, we live in an environment where there was pressure on prices in Europe. There were shortages in Europe. So it was more profitable for companies in the US to export it to Europe, which was increasing the prices for us here in the US. And that's what led to the price increase a few years ago. And then there was the Texas freeze. And then more recently, we've seen the inflation. So there are many dynamics that tend to be outside our control. And I will say as a hospital, till I engaged in these conversations, our core business is to take care of kids. We always think of managing cost on our supplies and labor and other, and you don't really think of energy as an area where you could be thinking more strategically. So again, a whole bunch of aspects, and in each of these I could spend half a day talking to you about it, but just I'm trying to give you a little bit of a view into what went into our thinking. The third thing that you see is actually a picture, actual picture from Creek Fire. So I don't know if you remember about 3 years ago, one of the largest California fires were Creek Fire. That fire came 30 minutes away from our hospital. So we were very close to that fire. We have actually several of our workforce members who lived in the area and had to be evacuated. And again, that was in the midst of COVID. I don't know if anyone can go back 3 years ago in their head and when the lockdowns had happened. And that summer, there was this fire that happened. And I was serving as our hospital's incident commander. We had set up a HIC structure. And I remember getting a call from our director of facilities telling me that we have a call from PG&E, that's our energy company for us is PG&E, that they have alerted us for a PSPS event. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what a PSPS event is, but since there have been fires in California, the energy companies can now shut down power if they see the risk of spreading because of that. And because the fires were so close to us, we were alerted. So I asked the gentleman who called me, his name is Mike, and I said, Mike, what's the likelihood of this happening? Because can you imagine being in the midst of a lockdown and being a hospital, and now all of a sudden you have to imagine that there is going to be a power shutdown? He said, well, we are likelihood is if it gets really close, they'll do it, but hopefully let's hope it doesn't. And then my next question was, Mike, what if it happens? What are we going to do? And he said, well, we'll go into the emergency power, which is our generator power. Again, I will say in all likelihood, it never came to fruition. The fire stopped 30 minutes away from us. We never had to be in that situation, fortunately for us, but it was a very close call for us. And it was very, very real for us to have a mitigation plan that if we are reliant on PG&E and PG&E has the power to say we're going to shut down your energy source because of a fire, that does leave us vulnerable from that standpoint. And then the last one, which I know is a big part of the conversation today, is the financial incentives for nonprofit. So there I'll probably share this as a backdrop, but I'll talk a little bit more about how IRA has played as a positive influence in all the dynamics. So for about 10 years, there were several solar companies who had reached out to our team and had wanted to implement solar because there are a lot of tax credits available to us. We had said no, and I will say in particular, our CEO had at that time made the decision no. And then when this project was given to me to look into it more deeply, one of the things as an overarching directive he had given is, you know, can you figure out a way that we can optimize the use of our nonprofit dollars? What that means is because we're a nonprofit hospital, we are a non-tax bearing entity. If there are tax incentives available, someone else is making money on our behalf. And if we could figure out a structure where we can, it's not that we didn't have the capital, it's just that we would always have to pay the capital to someone else because they are the tax-bearing entity, that this would not come to us in the most optimal use, which for us, the way it translates is our margins aren't really, really high. That means we are taking things that could have gone more for direct patient care or other resources, we are directing to something else. And we went quite far on this journey till Inflation Reduction Act was passed, which I will say came as a gift for us. And in our own way, we did support writing letters when the regulations were getting passed, so the act was getting passed, to support that we really need a carve out for nonprofits. Otherwise, we are incentivized to not do this work. So I want to spend a couple of more minutes, but in essence, I wanted to give you a little bit of a view into what triggered this conversation for us. And it was a whole series of risks and opportunities that we were trying to mitigate. Christine, I'm going to pause really quick and see if there's any questions. If not, I'll keep going.
If anybody has any questions, you can put them in the Q&A, typing questions in, and we're happy to answer them. And that's true throughout the presentation.
Thank you, Christina. As I said, I'll be talking at you the whole time, which I realize doesn't really give questions, and I'll take a couple of additional pauses so you can ask questions. I'll keep going. So the next, just a deeper dive into what the circumstances were pre-IRA Inflation Reduction Act and the post-IRA. So as I was pulling this presentation together and getting ready, I was thinking it was actually exactly a year ago, last September, we had done all of our financials and we were planning to take this project, which I'll give you a little bit more detail in a few minutes about what the work is, to our board to share with them what the financial structure will look like. So when it says pre-IRA, up until August, that was the structure that we had to work with. In essence, there was no way as a nonprofit we could come up with a structure to get the tax credit directly. So we would have to go as far as forming a new entity and taking the tax burden with the for-profit. We would have to pay certain banks and so forth. So as you can say, it was a very complex structure. And then in July and August, the Inflation Reduction Act passed. What that meant is, as a tax-exempt entity, we could now get direct pay in the forms of investment tax credits, or they're called ITCs, which really simplified the structure. So then again, we paused taking it to our board in September and went and took it in December because it took us another couple of months to redo all of our financials and structures and so forth. But again, much more streamlined process for us. In terms of ITCs for a nonprofit hospital, just to kind of, I'm sure there is much deeper literature, but I'll tell you, as we have done our math, there's up to 50% of our total investment as it relates to renewable energy is eligible for the inflation ITCs. And of that, 30% is base, which is based on prevailing wages, apprenticeship, 10% is domestic product, and 10% is low income area. I will say probably the one that was very specific to us, may or may not be applicable, is the low income area because we are in an underserved area. But the rest of the 30 to 40%, anyone across the country who met the requirements would qualify. I will also say we studied it as much as we could. Regulation still coming through. It is not finalized by any means. We are watching it very carefully, and we are very optimistic this will work through. And we did bake this in our financial, given the information that we had. So, okay. So we were amongst the first. So this is part of the conversation we had around why we needed an energy strategy. And I'm going to pause here in a little bit and really kind of call out our colleagues at Mazzetti, who have been phenomenal partners for us. When we realized that we needed to think of energy strategically, we also knew we didn't have the expertise at our own hospital. And then I actually went around looking for the right partner across the country who could help us develop the strategy, and got introduced to Walt Vernon at Mazzetti, and he and the team have been lockstep with us, helping guide us through the process. And what I have really enjoyed about working with them is they really heard us in terms of our circumstances. If resilience was important to us, that's the focus that we got on and kind of approached the strategy that way. And they were also very good at guiding us at the right places. And the reason I mentioned that is the climate pledge came out last year, and we were deliberating whether we should sign it or not. And it took a lot of analysis and conversations at our end, and a lot of conversations even with Mazzetti to help us at what's the downside of it. And we really couldn't think of a downside of signing this pledge. In fact, if anything, it got us aligned much better in terms of the work that needs to happen. So we were one of the first signees to sign the hospital climate pledge. A lot of our assessment at that time also was that it feels like this is coming down. Joint Commission, a regulatory body for the hospitals, is part of this climate pledge. And I mean, these are early indicators. Sooner or later, it's going to be baked in. We need to do this work. So for us, it gave us a little bit of a head start, is how I thought of it, giving the recommendation that we need to do. Plus, it is the right work to do. So again, a lot of conversations. So when we think about, we take care of kids, and our tagline is "Futures are worth fighting for." And so we don't think of now, given all the work we've done over the last 2 years, it's not just the future of their health, it's the environment in which they thrive. And this work was it was completely in sync with what our mission needed to deliver on. So for us, again, part of those conversations led us to this place, and we signed the pledge. And I'll also give you a view into what our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are. And actually, Christina, who's here, is the one who did this work for us. I will confess with you and tell you that this was all new to our organization. This was all new to us. So she and her team not only educated us, gave us the right information, and we had, I will say, we had a little bit buy-in at our end. There were lots of questions of why are we doing this work? We don't have the resources. What does this make sense? And so one of the things from the pledge that's required is that we create a baseline of our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. The pledge requires us to encourages us to reduce our emissions by 2030 by 50% and 100% by 2050. So when we did this, so we had already started this work, we then created a baseline. And if you look at our baseline, Scope 1, Scope 2, 96% of our emissions are coming from purchased electricity and natural gas. And it's only about 4% that are coming from all other areas. This information was very validating for us as it in terms of our energy strategy. Where we were going down the path for a microgrid not only answered our questions related to resilience, economics, but also helped us meet this goal, and I'll share a little bit about it. So this information, I will say in itself, maybe it's just a data point, but given in the context of our energy strategy, was very informative for us that we could spend a lot of energy changing our fleet. We could spend a lot of energy doing refrigerants and all this, but they're all combined 4% of our total emissions. We really need to take care of what the biggest chunk of this is first, and then we can over time. So when our fleets, we have to retire them, we will get the vehicle fleet that is more better suited for not having any emissions. We don't have to jump to that day one. Anyway, so that data from that perspective was very helpful for us. And now we are starting to look into what the scope 3 emission looks like. And again, I will again tell you that we are scratching our heads and looking for all the help from Christina and her team to figure out what does that look for us. Going into it, we didn't know what this was going to be, but it wasn't very labor intensive of a process. Christina made it very easy for us to kind of come up with this information, and we think we can ongoing do this. So I'm going to take another quick pause, Christina, before I jump into kind of our energy strategy and see if there's any questions come in.
I haven't seen any questions yet, so type them in if you have any. We're happy to answer them as we go through the presentation. Using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, you can submit questions to us.
Okay. Okay, so in terms of our energy strategy, in essence, I will say this is a summary of what I've spent last 15, 20 minutes sharing with you. We have 3 pillars of our energy strategy: operational resilience, financial efficiency, and environmental sustainability. Where we stand now, I will say it is a healthy tension between all 3 of these. We are constantly trying to weigh the pros and cons against all 3 of these aspects when we are making decisions, and we are starting to bake this more and more into the culture of our organization. We don't always have to do things just because it is financially effective. We can still figure it out financially effective and provides us the environmental sustainability at the same time. What is sort of the tug between the two, and what is that fine point where we need to stand? And same is true for operational resilience. So again, it's from operational resilience. It's really about mitigating against power interruptions. Our objective over time is that we want to be energy independent. That's what our board and our CEO has. Now, it may take us a while to get to that part of the journey, but I feel really good where we are right now and feel that we are on that path. And I hope one day I come and share with you that yes, we have we've gotten to that place. We wanted solutions, which is again, I'll share with you about our microgrid, which was again important to us, which are scalable. We are a growing campus. Our original hospital footprint has grown from the original parcel. We are adding additional buildings on our campus. So we did not want any solutions which are just one and done and hard to maintain. We really needed to think of this work in a scalable manner, that as we grow, this should grow, have the ability to grow with us. As I said, financial efficiency, given who we are, given the demographics that we serve, our margins are very slim and continuing to erode. And as I know, many of you interact with hospitals or work for hospitals, this pressure on our expense line is just growing more and more and more. And for us, it really did become about we need the optimal use of our nonprofit dollars. And it needed to be cost effective. We weren't looking for anything that, just sounded really good, because we don't have a large philanthropic support in our region. We are primarily dependent on government funding. Whatever the decisions we needed to take needed to be cost effective for us. And then as I said, our friends at Missouri were very informative in getting us to this place where environmental sustainability became a very important pillar and a triad of the work that we needed to do in terms of reducing our energy use over time through efficiency and then decarbonize. And I will also say, when we say decarbonize, the directive from our CEO and our board is we will have a direct. So we are not talking about carbon credits that we're going to buy from elsewhere. The work that we plan to do is going to be the work and the impact that we have on our region. These will be our own carbon credits that we are intending to use to say that we have now fully decarbonized. That is the tentacle that we are striving towards. Okay. So I'm going to, because Christina told me there's a whole bunch of engineers and architects and others. I am not at all from that field, but I will do my part in kind of explaining to you why we needed this strategy. I'm actually pulling these slides. I had used them for our board presentation last December, because this was my own way of translating the work. So hopefully it'll kind of make sense where our largest impact of our microgrid has been, where does microgrid come into play, and give you a little bit of a backdrop into the work, our current environment, and then how the whole plan is being laid out. So the black icon there is our original hospital parcel. It's the arrow shows we have the substation that provides energy supply to our hospital parcel. And then if this goes down, this is the normal power. We get our emergency power. We have 4 backup generators that have a fair amount of capacity, but these generators aren't connected to all of our plugs. They're just connected to what we call our emergency power plugs. So what that means is if the power goes down, and it happens when we have regular maintenance and others, we move the all of the critical equipment and so forth is connected to red power, but there are many other areas of the hospital that still need to continue to run that do not have power. I don't know why that decision was made when it was made, but back in the day, the decision was made. The emergency power was to be to red plus. We didn't have as many fires. We didn't have the same circumstances, so those decisions were made, but here we are. But then that, again, continues to be a challenge for us every time there's a power outage. I've been at our organization for about be close to 20 years, and every time there's a power, we're all sent home because there is a power outage. There's nothing we can do to operate. Now we're in a hybrid environment, it's a little bit different, but that's just the circumstance of where we were. The concept of the work that is what we are planning from a resilience perspective. So this is sort of the information that I just shared with you. Our step 1 is we are planning to do what we call a lot line adjustment to bring in some additional buildings outside of our main hospital that sits on our campus that will be connected in the same way, same parcel to our substation. So the energy source isn't direct PG&E, but it is the substation. That's our intention. In addition to that, we are planning to, my non-technical way of saying, rewire all of our normal plugs to be connected to the emergency power. So that's not just our red plugs, but emergency. So that is a bit of an investment for us that we are doing, but that investment was to, again, get that immediate resilience, but was in planning really to, when we have a microgrid, which is a combination of our solar and fuel cells with energy storage and will connect to ours. So really our power source, primary power source, when this microgrid is up and running will be the microgrid. And as the team, engineering team at Mazzetti has informed me and rest of our team, that really microgrid is really never a single point of failure because there are so many subcomponents to it that at any given time, maybe one piece will go down or another piece will go down. The likelihood of so many different pieces going down all at the same time is almost negligible. But our likelihood of this one point of failure is much, much higher. So over time, as we kind of end up going to a microgrid infrastructure, this becomes a primary and secondary source, which is what I mean is primary source and backup power. We'll keep our diesel generators in California. Our regulations are such that the only emergency powers that are approved at this time are generator power, which we are working along with several others to say that over time, microgrids do become the emergency power. So our thought is once those regs are passed and these diesel generators come to end of life, we really don't need to replace them, which is, again, additional savings for us that we will not need to replace these diesel generators, but we will keep them because that's what's required. In the meantime, it gives us this additional redundancy that we need. So a little bit about the capacity of our microgrid. So this is our hospital campus. I will say one thing that did work out for us. We do have a fair amount of land around our hospital. I know several other hospitals have rooftop solar and others. So our combination of our microgrid is solar 1.32 megawatts, fuel cells, and then battery capacity. And just a little bit again about the technology, our goal is to become energy independent. The amount of solar we would need by itself to become energy independent, there's no way we could produce the kind of space that we needed for that. The other challenge is solar only produces energy during the daytime, and really by itself wasn't giving us a solution. It would be sort of like in our problem, just a speck of a solution. And that's where the fuel cells come in. This is a picture of the fuel cells. They don't take a lot of space, but produce a lot of energy with very, very, very low emissions, and are able to help create the energy that's needed. And of course, the components of the storage and the microgrid controllers help store the energy and provide to us with our ups and downs depending on the needs that we have at the hospital. So in essence, this is the solution that we have that we are planning. And we got our contracts executed in earlier part of this year, designs complete, our construction will start. We're in the process of getting permits. The construction will start in 24, and our intention is by March 2025 that this will be operational. And then I have some final numbers to share with you. That in essence is my last slide to give you what this work has encompassed in numbers for us at the end of the day. But before I jump to my last slide, I wanted to see if there's any questions.
We do have one question. Is there a rating system that Valley Children's is using for tracking sustainability, like LEED or WELL, et cetera? Or new construction? It sounds like new construction based on the questions.
It's new construction, yeah. No, we are not at this time. We are not formally using anything.
Are there any other questions at the moment? We'll have time to take your questions at the end too, so don't hesitate to go ahead and put them in the chat whenever you're ready with your questions, and we'll be sure to address them at the end of the presentation. Oh, here's
so my
one.
last slide really.
Ratan, there's another question. How was seismic considered in the resilience aspect?
So the seismic certification, the reason we have the backup generators is because they're the only emergency power that's approved for seismic certification that's needed, so we will keep them. From the microgrid perspective, we are working with the vendors to get the subcomponents shake tested by the various regulatory bodies, that over time, when the whole microgrid becomes part of the approved, that the vendors can take that part of it and it's ready for us to go. So it's, again, right now it's not approved. That's why we have to keep the generators. And it's really in California, the seismic certification that's needed from emergency power. That's the reason we have the generators right now. Hope that answers the question.
I think so.
Okay.
Great. Thanks for your questions, everyone. That's great.
My very last slide really is to kind of put it all in context in terms of the work. You know, it's all well and good. It's a fantastic strategy, but what does this boil down to? This microgrid that we are planning to implement will meet 80% or 80% of our current energy needs. When I say current energy needs, what I mean is our main hospital campus. This does not account for when I said we are planning to do lock line adjustments and so forth. Those were sort of part of the discussions that we have. Initially, our thinking was that let's try and get 80% of the energy needs met, and let's try and find efficiencies in our infrastructure so that we can reduce some of the energy needs. We have some of the, I'm trying to think, I'm not a technical person, it's, you know, our air vents and our air handlers, they're not really, they're old, and once we replace them, the energy use will go down. So there are components of this conversation that we're trying to reduce. At this point in time, I don't think we'll get exactly to 100%, but it'll get us really, really kind of a good chunk of the way there for us to be energy independent over time. And one other reason why it's only 80% is it was that economics that we were trying to balance. If we had more battery storage, and batteries are expensive, then maybe we could get closer. But right now our battery storage capacity had to be where it is just to get us to the best economical model. It is a $30.5 million capital investment for us to put this microgrid in place. As part of this investment, we will no longer need to put a second substation to have that additional resilience, which was $4 or $5 million of expenses that we have mitigated. But in terms of when we've done the pro forma over 25 years, there's almost $13 million we'll have in operational savings because we'll be able to manage the inflation and the cost and so forth. And we've baked in that's what some of the costs would be for managing this microgrid. But over time, we really do anticipate that this is going to be favorable to our operating income line. And then the Inflation Reduction Act. So I put kind of up to $14 million if we meet all of the different buckets of the ITC requirements, which are again being finalized. We stay very optimistic and stay very close to that subject as the guidelines are being developed. We anticipate that it's up to $14 million of direct pay that we will get back. So when you kind of put the $13 million investment with the operating income savings and the ITCs that you could get back and the resilience that we end up getting as a result, the economics of this were very straightforward for us. And then really, I will say just this was the, just on top of everything else, that we will reduce our greenhouse emissions just by this one project by 50.5% from the baseline, which again is a gift on top of everything else that we are going to do, and will help us meet the requirements as we have pledged to get to 50% by 2030. So really, this is my last slide, and then I will summarize with, this is our CEO. He doesn't like that I put his picture up, but I do put his picture up because if I sort of reflect back on this project and the work we've done, I really do think it starts with leadership, because the board had asked him to look into it and I report directly to him. So in essence, I didn't have any barriers to think about what is possible or not possible, because as hospital folks, we have a lot of reasons why we shouldn't do things. We are not very much the risk takers in that, but he allowed the space because that work was really important. And in his words, he would say this work over time has become so formative and formative for us, because it's really not just about clean and renewable energy for us. It is about making sure that our hospital continues to be in place when kids need us. We serve some of the most vulnerable population, whether you are now navigating COVID or creek fire or others. We want this place to be open 24/7, 365, no matter what, because there are kids in our region that are counting on us. And again, really, this project and this work stays very true to our tagline that says "Futures worth fighting for." And in his own words, they say that we know taking care of kids is sacred work for us, and that is our number one priority. So with that, I know I've spoken at you for feels like a long time. I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions, and if you have other questions, folks, please put them into the Q&A function and we'll get them in the queue. The first question is, are these lithium-ion batteries? How many hours of resilience are you expecting from them? And is there a planned replacement of the batteries as they degrade?
So I'm not a technical person, so I'll answer some of these questions for you. It is my understanding these are lithium-ion batteries. Bethany Bears is the expert at Mazzetti on this stuff. So if there are questions, we can maybe Christina jot them down and get back to who's asked the question if that's available to us. And there was, yes, so we did have a replacement factor for these batteries at end of life, which was baked into our analysis. And that's not just true for batteries, that's true for all of the components. And they don't all age at the same life cycle. Some of them have a life cycle, for instance, solar has a shorter life cycle, batteries have a certain life cycle, fuel cells have a certain life cycle. So we had all baked that in, I would say, when we came at it from a financial perspective.
And how many hours of resilience are you expecting from the batteries? I mean, can you talk a little bit about how the microgrid is going to support your ability to weather those power interruptions?
Christina, I will say I will be talking really out of turn. The way I kind of have translated in our head is it meets at 80 hours of 80% of our needs. So that's all the high, I'm trying to think, because it takes into account both, in a hospital, you have high utilization between certain hours and then low utilization between other hours. It's not exactly a math of how many hours, but it is a combination of the highs and the lows and over time. But the number we've come up with, the way we're calculating, is 80% of the needs that are being met at any given point in time. So that's the storage capacity of the batteries. And I'll see if I can find the number of how many hours are, but it's not available to me right now.
Well, and you also have your backup generators still in play, which gives you that that requirement in place. So you have
and
double.
Christina, for us, the intention is to go to the microgrid as our primary source. So it's almost like our primary and backup. Does that make sense?
Yep. All right, next question is HCI approval required for all 3 microgrid project components, fuel cells, BESS, and solar PV?
It is in HCI approval process as we speak right now, which is why the permitting process is not until we can start construction. The project is going through that right now, yeah.
And that's a California-specific requirement. So just for those of you who might be attending from other geographies, HCI is the regulatory body within California that manages healthcare compliance. So they're an important part of the puzzle. Their approval is an important part of the puzzle. All right, here's another question. What is one of your biggest lessons learned for a hospital facility who's trying to build more resilient and sustainably? What advice do you have for other hospital facilities who are trying to achieve what you have set out to do?
I'll maybe start with the advice and then kind of go to the biggest lesson in a second way. But I think that's a really fantastic question. And as I reflect back on the work we've done, and I sound kind of strange, I really think it just takes a little bit of it's giving yourself permission to go seek and do this work. To me, I feel like because we gave ourselves permission, it is much easier for us to say, well, this isn't possible at our organization because of this. And I will also share with you, as we went down this work, and the reason I kind of pulled our CEO is the fact that I worked with him directly opened up a lot of new opportunities for us to think through ideas. And when I talked to our facilities executives and all, they had a lot of concerns about this work, because this has not been done in the same way, and what does this mean, and so forth. And again, their whole job and their roles are designed to think of what can go wrong. And this work was, let's figure out how we make it work. And culturally, we are not the cutting edge kind of an organization. Again, that's not what we do. We did a lot of homework. We studied each of these components and did our part. And again, as I said earlier, Mazzetti was a really excellent partner. So all that to kind of come back and say is, one, I think it really kind of is about giving yourselves permission to go forth and explore this work and not just limit yourself for what's not possible. Second is getting buy-in from your top leadership. Again, for me, I was very fortunate because I was doing this work on behalf of our CEO because he'd asked, and that really opened up. I also realized that if I was 3 levels deep in the organization and came up with this, and if my top leadership didn't buy in, it would be much more challenging in that environment, because I ended up having those conversations on the other side once we'd kind of got the buy-in from the top leadership. So like everything else in our environment, and I think it's, again, starting small and seeing what the needs are of your organization beyond just kind of what is available, because we had a lot of things that are available to us, but you really have to see what is your circumstance, what makes most sense for your facility. You may not have the land like we had. You may have a smaller, may want to start smaller. You may not have the fires that you're looking at as such, but it really is about just starting this work and exploring what is possible. I actually also will say, this didn't come up, but it was in a different conversation. I think this is a very opportune time for hospitals because of the ITCs available to us from Inflation Reduction Act. Timing-wise, this seems like the right time. Again, fortunately for us, we have been a couple of years into this work and we're going down this path. But if you're thinking about it, I would say now is the time to explore it.
You know, you mentioned your board a couple of times. This is my question for you. How did your board receive this sort of change of direction that you had? You were sort of going down one path and then you decided to go down this path. How did you manage that conversation?
Christina, really good question. So I will say that when I say our CEO had asked me to do this work, it was actually one of our board members who is a farmer, and she got solar on her property, and she kept encouraging our CEO that you got to think of another way of looking at it. And she was really the catalyst for us in getting that work started from our CEO. And then we ended up taking it to a whole different dynamic in an environment. So when we came back with this complete strategy to our board, they had literally no questions. They totally got it. They were on board and understood why we needed to do this work. I mean, you can't really argue with some of the economic and the resilience we end up getting. And again, if we do the decarbonization on top of that, given that's the better work for us to do, this was received very well by them.
Great. We had another question that I answered via text. It was just a question about whether, since fuel cells are running off natural gas, are they viewed as transitional and bending the climate curve? Can you talk a little bit about the emissions conversation relative to fuel cells that you had?
Yeah. So from a fuel cell perspective, the relative emissions that happen are so much smaller than, for instance, we would be running the generators and the emissions as a result of that. They are really, I don't have the exact number, but they're really, really small part of the emissions. And also this technology is evolving, and we kind of hope that as through the life cycle that we have these fuel cells, these conversations, Christina, please correct me, I think it's the hydrogen is where they're intending to go as the next phase, and those would have even further emissions. So it's again that when I say our energy pillars are sort of like a triad, it was the balance of all three, because if we didn't get fuel cells, we just could not practically end up getting the kind of solar capacity that's needed. And the emissions that are generated from fuel cells just are almost negligible compared to what some of the even just electricity and other components are. So it was a little bit of, from our perspective, a trade-off of what was available to us at this point in time. Versus, I will say, this is a thing we've started to see a lot more at our hospital. Don't let perfect get in the way of good.
Yeah, good point. This is a question from Bethany, actually. Ratan, can you talk about how you're messaging these goals and commitments as you look at recruiting the next generation of providers?
Thank you, Bethany, for asking that question. So I'll maybe kind of, again, we are not, so we are in Central California. When we compete for talent, being a pediatric provider, we are competing across the country for the talent. And I'll say the newer generation of whether it's doctors or nurses, any organization they work for want to see an aspect of what is the impact you're having on the community you serve, and what is the impact you're having as an organization. So we have actually leveraged this work towards our, I will say, recruitment strategy. So I appreciate Bethany asking, because that is sometimes a long line to draw from how is this work relevant to that. And we've actually done a good amount of, I'll say, PR as it relates to our recruiting efforts to really showcase to whether it's our new class of residents who are starting or doctors that we are recruiting about this work, so that they can really feel good about the organization that they're working for. It is just not about, it is very much about taking care of the kids who are the most vulnerable, but the hospital in itself is doing their part to sustain this. And this, in that conversation, this energy decarbonization conversation, a very important anchor of it. So we also have other goals regarding, and Krishna and I were talking about it before our conversation about food waste and impact on, we talk about social determinants of health and all of that. Those are part of these conversations that we continue to have, but it gives us a very important anchoring and a tangible point to share with those who may have not considered or otherwise to say that you want to be part of something like this? So I appreciate that question, Bethany.
And how are they receiving that information? Do you have any feedback from the residents or candidates?
So Christina, I will say we are sort of early in that work, but the team, so some of our physicians who have to go talk to other physicians have been thrilled about this work and have been seeking this information because from their perspective, this is going to become, as I said, an anchoring point for a lot of their recruitment efforts. And in terms of receiving that information, I would say from deduction that it was being received really well, because then they wouldn't be coming and saying, can you give us all the updates about this? We want to be able to talk about it. So we've really kind of launched this aspect of our recruitment teams, whether it's on physician side or staff side, that have requested that information.
It sounds like it has potential for retention then too.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So this was presented at our leadership team, the project by our facilities team a couple of months ago. A lot of positive feedback. We are being a little bit more mindful internally because we really want to kind of do the big showcase once we have it up and running. So we've been a little bit more sharing the information in planned strides.
Yeah, great. Well, I'll give anyone a moment just to type in any questions. We've answered all the questions we've received, but let's just give a second to see if any other questions are being typed. Don't forget that you can use the Q&A function to submit any questions you may have. We have a couple minutes left in our time together. Just give it a second. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have today, Ratan. Thank you so much for your sharing your story today. I think this is going to be a really exciting project to watch as you guys establish yourselves as leaders in this space. So thank you very much. And thank you all for attending today. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn and to explore bending the climate curve. And please join us next month for the next installment in our series. We'll see you then, and thank you very much for attending. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ratan.